Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Typically on a Wednesday, we are experiencing some technical issues with Nick having some trouble joining the meeting. This is why we have the 5-minute buffer at the start. Hopefully, he will be joining us very soon.
There
In
he
the
is.
meantime,
Hello,
is he
Nick.
here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what the issue was. Microsoft was complaining about me logging in. Anyhow, not here nor there.
You're in now. That's the main thing.
Yes,
It would have
yes.
been interesting hosting a webinar, an interview with Nick Desbarats with no Nick Desbarats. But that
Doesn't work
Yeah.
so well, no.
Ian and I were fighting over who was going to be Nick in the webinar, if that were the case. Yeah,
Okay, easy shoes to fill.
definitely not. Okay, welcome everyone. We'll give it a couple more minutes as we have some more people who have registered who are maybe not attending yet. Hope everyone's having a very good Wednesday. We're through the middle of the week. The weekend is in sight. I always like to kick meetings off, and if you've attended Dashboard in a Day, I always ask the question, tea or coffee, which do you prefer? Or maybe you prefer hot chocolate, or maybe you just drink water, and that's not strange at all. Let me know what you think.
it's a bar chart race.
Bar chart race, yeah.
T was winning, but coffee's just overtaken it.
How 2023.
Yeah.
Oh, here comes tea. Tea's catching up.
I'm on my second cup of tea in the morning. Has anyone had more than 4 cups of tea? It's 12 o'clock, so it's not entirely a challenge to actually drink 4 teas, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit having had 3 so far.
There's usually always one person who prefers hot chocolate. Maybe they've not arrived yet. Okay.
I actually clicked hot chocolate, but then it
Did
says this
you?
feature isn't available in your version of Teams.
Ah,
I don't know what version of Teams I have. Apparently it's different than everybody else.
Teams is just,
I would have been the hot chocolate holdout.
there we
One of
go.
these lunatics who doesn't like coffee or tea.
That they are definitely amongst us. I've got friends who are like that, and I've just accepted that's the way it goes sometimes. Okay, I have another poll, which is asking about your data visualization training. How much data visualization training have you had? None at all? You've read some books, articles? Have you attended a webinar? Is this your first webinar on the subject? Or have you done an online course?
Yeah, and I think this one is, disregard technical training in a tool like Power BI or Tableau. Then we're talking about how to choose color, how to lay things out on screen, how to choose charts.
Still can't vote.
Teams is not your friend today.
Definitely not. No, I mean we tried this all out yesterday and it seemed to work fine, but I think we're seeing that for some amazingly, Microsoft is not a perfect company.
Okay, it's good to see many of you have done an online course and you've attended formal training. And we'll be sharing some resources in the post-webinar email as well, to some books, articles, webinars, things like that. Hi, Martin. You've got your hand up.
Maybe
I've allowed the mic.
Martin.
Yeah, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Ignore me.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Hi, Ian. How you
Yeah,
doing?
good. Long time no speak.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Good, good. And Martin and I go back, I don't know how long it is, 15 years,
Oh,
something like that.
no, not that long. 10 years maybe.
10
when
years.
we were young and
Yeah. At a place that we won't mention. A
Indeed.
little over 10 years ago. Must be about 11 or 12 actually.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. I think it is now 12:05. That is my cue to pass over to Ian and give a little introduction. Then we'll get to talking to Nick about why dashboards fail and how to rescue them. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Kelsey. Big thumbs up, everyone, if you can see my screen. I'm assuming you can. Thank you very much. Good. So I'm not going to take too much of your time because we want to devote most of this time to hearing from Nick. So I've just got a couple of slides to tell you about who we are. And then I've got a couple of questions for Nick, and then we're going to hear from him. And then we're going to take your questions. You can, as we go through, you can use the Q&A, and we'll also have a section at the end where you can ask your questions out loud. So there's a Q&A little icon at the top of your screens. Try and use that rather than chat, and then we can curate them a bit better in there. So a little bit about us. We are a relatively new company, just over 18 months old now. And we set ourselves up to support what we call this new generation of Power BI developers, analysts, and storytellers. So Power BI has been around for the last 10 years now, and it really opened up data and analytics to a whole new raft of people. Previously, data and analytics or business intelligence was quite an expensive undertaking. So it was reserved for large enterprises using heavyweight tools to build data warehouses, data platforms, and put together visualizations. But Power BI really changed that with their cost model. And so it's quite revolutionary. And so now we have managers and accountants and all sorts of people that don't necessarily have a background in data theory, understanding how to model data and understanding how to present data. So those are the types of people that we support. Our watchwords are quality, integrity, and respect, which means that we aim to deliver everything to a world-class standard. We are totally honest, whether it's good news or bad news, and we respect your time and money. The way we support this new generation is through training and coaching, primarily support and consultancy, and we love doing a bit of innovation as well. And as you can see at the bottom there, we're really helping people get the most out of their data using Power BI and associated technologies. So we are not Microsoft resellers, we are Microsoft partners for training delivery. But we don't resell. We do use Microsoft Fabric and other Microsoft tools, but also tools from other vendors, Tableau, Click, Snowflake, Matillion, all sorts of things that we might use to help you with your data journeys. The training that we offer is shown on this slide with the rectangles, the rounded rectangles there. We have 7 training courses leading to various certifications. But the one I want to focus on today is this one here, which is our version of what Nick does, an introduction really to what Nick does. This is a very short course, 8 hours of data storytelling best practice and principles. And I regard this as being the most important training course that we deliver, simply because you can spend a long time learning the technicalities of Power BI and learning how to get your data in the right shape and making sure the numbers are right. And once you've done all of that, if you present it badly, all of that work will be wasted. And Nick will talk about that a lot more in a little while. I just wanted to bring this slide up. I will put this up at the end of the session as well, but I know some of you will probably have to leave before then. So Nick is coming to Amsterdam next month and in November to deliver his practical charts and practical dashboards courses, 2 full days each. And I wanted to put this up now so you can get that code, and the link will go in the chat as well. But please, if you do book this, use this discount code rupe01, rupe-01. That'll give you a 23.5% discount off that training if you book before the end of next Monday. I can't recommend these training courses highly enough. I went on them last year with Nick, and we invited Nick over to London last year to deliver these. And we have forged a partnership with Nick because of the quality of his training and his writing as well, his books. So Nick is a disciple of Stephen Few. He'll tell you a little bit about that in a second, I'm sure. Like I was, Stephen Few was one of the forefathers in this discipline of data visualization best practices. And I went on a training course of his back in 2015 that completely blew my mind. Before that, I had no idea that there was any research or science around this subject, and the way I chose charts and colors was just really what I thought looked good. And to my horror, I found out that it wasn't very good, and that I needed to change some things. But that training inspired me. I went on to read all of Stephen's books and books by many other authors, and latterly I've read Nick's books as well, which I think are excellent. So Nick was authorized by Stephen to deliver his training, and then when Stephen retired in 2019, Nick carried on doing that and then started to put his own material together. And with that, I'm going to just ask Nick, how did you get into this in the first place, Nick?
Yeah, well, I mean, 50,000 years ago, I was a software developer, but I got a little bit bored with that. And so I moved around to different parts of software organizations, going into some product management, product design, some marketing roles, even some strategic sales, founded a couple of companies. But probably starting maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I also developed kind of a sideline interest in cognitive psychology, this psychology of perception and judgment and biases, decision-making. And then, I attended a Stephen Few webinar, as you did, but mine was actually a little bit earlier in 2013. And same experience as you had, Ian, right? Just absolutely mind-blowing. Really just, for the first time understanding that it was, exactly as you described, right? It's much more than just about aesthetics or what you think looks good. There are, a lot of principles and best practices that are really important to be aware of. Most charts are poorly designed. And so I ended up chatting with Steve for a bit, a number of months. I got laid off from my job, and that was my first call was to Steve, asking him if he had ever had people, teach his courses. He hadn't. But it was largely because, if you've ever attended a Stephen Few course, you know that it's mostly about psychology, and the people who had approached him had mostly kind of data backgrounds, but not a background in psychology. And so as it turned out, my sideline interest in psychology, because by that point I'd probably read 50 books or something, turned out to be very useful because he agreed to train me to teach his courses on that basis. And so, so I did that from, as you mentioned, about 2013. Actually, I started teaching in 2014. I went through 7 months of intensive training. Steve gave me a huge stack of books to read, and then I started teaching his courses, which was, of course, incredibly useful. Learned a lot about what do people tend to know and not know about data visualization, about dashboard design, which is, of course, going to be the main topic of my talk today. And then, as you mentioned, when Steve retired in 2019, he encouraged me to create my own content, my own books, my own courses, which I then started doing, launched them straight into the pandemic. But actually, things went surprisingly well when we moved over to doing this kind of thing online. And so as it stands today, I do probably about 25% of my training in person, about 75% online, because so many teams are still remote. But in fact, I just got back from Europe about 36 hours ago, doing some work in Amsterdam and Germany. And so I still travel quite a bit, teaching all over the world, across virtually every or every sector: aerospace, nonprofit, government, banking, finance, retail, manufacturing, pretty much everything in between.
Great, thank you. And when people ask you, what do you do for a living? How do you describe it?
IT. Because normally
that's what I do as well.
Most people don't really sort of know or want to know much beyond that. But I mean, if it's, of course, in a crowd that actually works in the space, then yeah, I basically say that I teach people how to make charts and graphs that are going to be easily understood, and ultimately that do their job. That, to me, that's the sort of the threshold, or the sort of the gold standard that we should be aiming for when creating charts and dashboards, is that they do their job, right? And so with charts, that can mean many different things. Like, we're always creating charts for a reason. It could be to persuade the audience to do something, or just simply to explain something to them, or to increase their awareness of something. And so, actually accomplishing that requires a great deal of skill. I think a lot more than people sort of realize. And then on the dashboard side, if I'm talking to somebody who has maybe a slightly more kind of business intelligence-y background, or they've been exposed at least to dashboards, I basically say that I teach them how to make dashboards that will still be in use 3, 6, 12 months down the line. Because, as we'll see in my talk, a lot of dashboards, in fact, in my experience, most dashboards do not survive that long. A lot of excitement at first, but then 3 months later, nobody's using it. And so my value proposition is, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know, so that 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, people are still using the dashboard.
Nice, thank you. Good segue. So with that, why is it that you say so many dashboards fail?
Yeah, again, yeah, that's actually probably a good segue. Let me just, hopefully I'll share my screen here. You're seeing that title slide here? Yeah. All right.
Yep.
So yeah, as I mentioned, I think that this is reality. Unfortunately, this is not something, of course, that Microsoft or Tableau or IBM or any of the others are going to tell you, but the success rate with dashboards is very low, and it has been since the dawn of dashboards. Really, 30, 40 years ago, we were calling them executive information systems, and they've gone through a bunch of buzzwords since then. But unfortunately, the graveyard of abandoned dashboards is well populated. People log in at first, they're all excited, but then if you have analytics hooked up to your dashboard, which of course you should, you see that weeks or months later, nobody's checking in, or if they're using it, they tolerate it. They don't necessarily like it. And so it's not great out there in the dashboard world. Obvious question, of course, is, why? Why does this happen? And I think that, unfortunately, there is no single reason. There is a kind of a constellation of reasons. There are many different reasons. And so, really, until you start tackling, if not all, then certainly most of these, then you can't really expect sort of a significantly different result. Now, because our time is limited today, I'm only going to talk for maybe about 20 or 25 minutes. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A, as Ian mentioned. Happy to answer questions. Just put them in that Q&A feature in Teams, and then we'll get to as many as we can after the talk, and then maybe I can do the rest via email if we don't have time to tackle them all. So yeah, I'm obviously not going to have time to talk about all of these, but maybe a few of the key ones, like this kind of cluster of reasons here at the top, which have to do with what I call action or sentiment indicators on dashboards. And so, in my experience, probably 80% of the dashboards that I see kind of in the wild will look something like this, i.e., it's just the numbers, right? And you might be thinking, well, yeah, obviously, like, what's the problem there? And the problem is that this makes what I call the deadly assumption, which is that our audience has basically detailed background knowledge about all of these numbers, and they are going to be able to tell which ones are good or bad, which ones require attention. Is that a safe assumption? Well, I mean, they're going to have probably detailed background knowledge about some of these numbers, but a lot of them, no, right? Probably most of them, in fact, on the dashboard. They are not going to know. Okay, so for overtime rate here at 1.8%, is that good? Is that bad? The odds are, in fact, I mean, they might, but the odds are, in fact, pretty low that they actually know, whether those numbers are good or bad. And then even if they have all of that background knowledge for all of these numbers, which is incredibly unlikely, it's still going to be very time consuming for them to scan the dashboard, see, like, are there any problems? Is there anything that I need to really pay attention to here? Like, they're going to have to go through it and say, is this okay? Is this number okay? Is this number okay? And people just don't have time to do that. And so I think that, whenever I see a dashboard like this, and again, this is probably 70-80% of dashboards that I see out there with no kind of action indicators or sentiment indicators, nothing to tell the user what is good or bad. My prediction is that this dashboard will die pretty quickly, because to most people, it's just random numbers. And it's also very time consuming, right? It might take 30 or 40 minutes to go through each one of these and think, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? And people just don't have time, so then they don't use the dashboard. Now, as I mentioned, in my experience, 80 and 90% of dashboards look like this, but there are maybe 10 or 20% of dashboards that actually do have sentiment indicators of one type or another. There are about 5 common types. Probably the most common type is change versus previous period. And so here you can see that I've added the percentage difference for the current value versus the value on the previous day. And so in theory, this should help, right? This should tell us, are we sort of having a good day or a bad day? What requires attention? So let's try it, right? We're having a good day or a bad day? Quick. Right? Anything require attention? What should I focus on first here? Yeah, right. And so you might be thinking, oh, well, maybe focus on the larger deviations, the bigger numbers. But this could just be a very volatile metric, for example, right? It's down 30 or up, I guess in this case, 35% one day, it'll be down 32% the next. And so even this, like, I don't know, this could be a big problem or not. And so it is going to be very time consuming. I have a very technical term for this problem where we're basically highlighting everything, which is the same thing as highlighting nothing, which is Christmas tree syndrome, because our dashboard is lit up red and green, except in this case, it's Christmas 365 days a year, because our dashboard is always going to look like this, right? Because unless the current value happens to be identical to the previous value, it gets flagged. And so we're basically just flagging everything all the time, which is the same as flagging nothing. The other probably second most common method that I'll see is is showing deviation from target, right? And so we choose a target value for every one of these metrics, and then we show whether it's 3% above or 4% below target or whatever. Great. So let's try using it. What kind of day are we having? Is it a good day or a bad day? I don't know. It's just a lot of red and green indicators, and of course, it always will look like that. What requires attention here? Well, just because something is like, higher, like has a higher percentage deviation from target, doesn't necessarily mean that it requires more attention. Like if I were to look at something like website uptime, if this were 1% off target, and so, our website uptime was like 99%, that would actually be a disaster, but it would only be 1% off target, right? And so again, it's going to be very time consuming. It's going to take, like 30 or 40 minutes for people to go through this. And we also basically are back to Christmas tree syndrome once again. And so even if you look at, methods like showing deviation from trailing average, we take the average of the last 30 days compared to that, you'll still get Christmas tree syndrome or even good, satisfactory, poor ranges. Unfortunately, none of these actually work because in all of these different sort of methods, we're flagging everything all the time. And so that's why instead I use something that I call action dots. And so all of a sudden, really, for the first time compared to any of the other methods that we could have talked about, we're not flagging everything all the time. We've actually kind of defeated the Christmas tree. Even before explaining anything, you can probably guess, sort of what this means, right? We have some, serious problems here, and then maybe one or two perhaps less serious problems. And it looks like maybe there's a couple of things that are going particularly well. And that's, of course, exactly what this means. People are going to have questions, of course, and you're probably asking yourself right now, okay, well, how did the dashboard know where to put dots or, whether to put a light red dot or a medium or dark red dot? And so the way that these are generated is by essentially assigning 4 thresholds to each metric, right? And so if we look at calls answered per hour, the first threshold is called crisis. And this would be the same for any metric, by the way. And so crisis has a very specific definition, which is the point at which improving this metric would become the user's top and possibly only priority. And so if we ever got down to 550 calls per hour, we'd pretty much drop everything until this was actually improved. And so, by the way, this is much more precise than something like poor. If you're talking about poor, poor, satisfactory, good, poor can mean lots of things, but crisis has a very specific definition. And then the second threshold is what I call actionably bad. And so this is the point where if the metric ever got this bad, right, if it ever got down to 610 or whatever, then we would actually do something. We're not just unhappy. We're so unhappy we're going to cancel the project. We're going to launch an investigation. We're actually going to take some kind of action. And then the mirror image of that is what I call actionably good. And so this is the point, again, where I'm not just happy if the metric gets to this point. I'm so happy that I'm going to do something about it, right? I'm going to allocate more funding to the project. I'm going to promote somebody. I'm going to take some kind of action. And then the fourth threshold is what I call best case. And so this is the point where, realistically, how good do we think this metric could ever get? It'll probably never get there, right? But if it did, I would want that to be extremely noticeable on the dashboard. And that's basically where the action dots colors come from, right? And so anything that is between actually bad and actually good, by definition, gets no dot because, by definition, it actually requires no action because that's what these thresholds actually mean. And by the way, in reality, out there in the real world, most metrics fall in this range most of the time because that is reality. Most metrics do not require action most of the time. Now, of course, these are going to change over time. What we consider to be best case or crisis or actually good is going to be probably different than it was maybe 6 months ago or 12 months ago. And so these thresholds do need to be updated as circumstances change, but that's normal, right? That's to be expected. If you don't have time to set the 4 thresholds for all of your metrics, which you probably don't, because once you start getting into segmentation of metrics, for example, like you start segmenting by region or product or whatever, you can quickly end up with many, like hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of metrics. And so my dashboards course actually provides some quite simple statistical calculations that actually allow these to be generated kind of dynamically. It's not ideal. It's always better to set them manually, but for all of the metrics that we don't have time to set the 4 thresholds for manually, there are ways to come up with what I call intelligent defaults using some surprisingly simple statistics. And so that's how we end up with something like this. This is a typical day because, like I said, in reality, most metrics don't require attention most of the time. And so instead of taking, say, 30 or 40 minutes to figure out what kind of day are we having, what requires attention, how long is this going to take? 1 second, maybe 2, right? And so massive, massive improvement in terms of, essentially the use of the user's time, which in turn, of course, contributes to the likelihood that they'll still be using it 6 or 12 months down the line because it's basically so fast. And finally, we have defeated the Christmas tree, right? We're not flagging everything all the time, which is the case for virtually every other method of flagging metrics that require attention. And so if the CEO, this is the CEO dashboard here, if the CEO logs in one day and sees something like this, even though at first glance it looks very boring, right? If the CEO knows about action dots, this is actually the sexiest damn dashboard they've ever seen, because what is this telling them? Everything's okay. Like everything is okay. How long did it take them to figure that out? Less than 1 second. Right. So we're giving them back enormous amounts of time during their day. And also, by the way, allowing them to basically monitor far more information, far more metrics than they were able to do before. Whereas if they log in one day and see something like this is, they know immediately this is going to be a bad day. Because if this many metrics are flagged, that would be extremely unusual. It means that, the hurricane has hit, the pandemic has started, something has gone horribly wrong that is affecting multiple aspects of the organization. But it took me 1 or 2 seconds to figure that out instead of 30 or 40 minutes. And I have priorities, right? I know where to start. I start these really dark red dots, these crises. Once these are under control, then I can go to the sort of medium and the lighter red dots. And so even when many things are flagged, we're still basically telling them, okay, start here. This is the thing that requires most of your attention. And so again, this kind of cluster of these top 3 reasons are probably the most common reasons why dashboards die, but there are many others. I think I have time to talk about maybe 2 of the others, which have to do with essentially the amount of information that we're actually showing on the dashboard, and the likelihood that if a metric is going, poorly, it is actually going to show up on the dashboard. And so again, another sort of quite typical dashboard, you might be looking at this and thinking, this looks fine, right? There's nothing obviously wrong. Hopefully after the last sort of 10 minutes or so, you would maybe realize that there are no action indicators on this dashboard, which means it's probably going to die. But I want to talk about another problem with this dashboard, which has to do with the filters, right? So we have these filters down here along the side. Actually, sorry, before I get into that, I also want to mention, of course, that we're actually showing very little information here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 metrics, and then kind of a breakdown here. The dashboard that I was showing before had something like 50 or 60. And so, a really good chance that if there is a metric that's going wrong, it's not going to be on this dashboard, which is a problem. But there's another problem here, which has to do with, like I said, these filters, right? If I want to know, okay, well, are there problems with revenue or profit or units sold? I'm going to have to click through each one of these. And, if this is a daily dashboard, it means I'm going to have to do that every day, right? Is there a problem with revenue, with profit? Click, 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 click. Are people going to do that? Probably not, right? It's fine for lookup. If they just want to see, what was our revenue in a particular region for a particular product on a particular day or quarter or whatever, great. But if they want to know essentially what requires attention, is there anything in here that I need to pay attention to? Not so great, because in fact, it gets even worse because we have all these filters as well down the side here, right? And so if there are particular problems, for example, with just one category, just one company, or just one region, probably not going to see it, because I would have to filter on every product, every company, every region, every category, every day. Am I going to do that? Probably not. And so what this means is that there are going to be many problems that are going to occur in the organization that would genuinely require attention, which either simply aren't going to show up on the dashboard because we're showing so few metrics, or they're going to be there, but they're going to be basically hidden behind filters. And so because of this, when something bad happens in the organization and then the dashboard doesn't make people aware of it, and then the problem just gets worse and worse and worse until it kind of festers, until it finally blows up, and then everybody's in damage control mode. But then afterwards, they're like, well, the dashboard didn't even alert me to this problem in the first place, and so I'm just not going to check it anymore. And then you have a dead dashboard. And so that's why something like this has far more information on it. Like I said, instead of showing 4 or 5 numbers, we're showing more like 40 or 50 or 60, because that's reality, right? In 2025, even relatively junior roles are now responsible typically for dozens or sometimes even hundreds of metrics. And so, but even this, of course, is not showing everything, right? And so I'm only, for example, showing 5 metrics about operations. Obviously, there are many more metrics about operations, but I can see as a CEO here that we do have some problems in operations. And so, but I would like more detail. I want to know more about what's going on in operations. And so wouldn't it be cool if we could do something like this? Click on operations, and now we are going to an entire dashboard about operations, much more detail than the 5 numbers that I was looking at before. And I can see, oh yes, we seem to have a problem with defect rate, right? That's what's causing the issue in operations, because in manufacturing, that's part of operations in our organization. But I'm only looking at a little bit of information about manufacturing and about defect rate. And so, because there are many ways that I could break it down. Defect rate, here are only 2 of them. I want to know more. I want to know more about what's going on with defect rate. Wouldn't it be cool if, again, I could just click, and then now I'm looking at an entire dashboard. This is the units manufactured dashboard, because that's where defect rate lives. That's where it came from, right? And so now we're showing defect rate broken down by everything, right? By all the categories. We're also showing it alongside other related metrics from our units manufactured database, so that I can get a good idea of why this metric might be behaving as it is. And I can see, oh yes, indeed, it is this particular product in this particular manufacturing plant that is causing the problem. Now, somebody like the CEO may or may not ever drill down to this level, but they certainly could, and they would just kind of follow the dots, essentially. And so what I just showed you are actually 3 types of dashboards, and it's kind of important for you to be aware of this, even though users don't have to know about this. And so the first dashboard that I showed you is what I call a role dashboard, which is, of course, a dashboard that is designed for a specific role, like the CEO or account representatives or regional managers or whatever. And then we went to the operations dashboard, which is an example of what I call an area dashboard. And an area can be almost anything. It can be a department, a region, a team, any kind of subdivision, essentially, of the organization. In this case, it was operations. And then the units manufactured dashboard was an example of what I call an entity dashboard. And so this is basically a dashboard about a single type of thing. So a dashboard about our employees, about our transactions, about our products. Essentially a dashboard that is generated entirely based off of a single table from our database system. Again, users don't have to understand any of this, because to them, this basically looks like a news website. It's structured in exactly the same way. And so the home page here is analogous to a role dashboard. It doesn't have all of the information that a given user might need to do their job, because that would be like putting all of the information on a website on a single page, right? It's not going to work very well. But it's easy to get around, right? If I want to know, for example, more about politics or technology, then I could click on these sections, which in this case would be analogous to areas, like area dashboards, and then I get a whole page about that area. And if I were to click on a specific story, which would be like clicking on a single metric, this would go to an entire page about that metric. That would help me to understand what's going on there. And so, the nice thing is that we don't have to train users about this, right? They already know how to do this. They've been doing this for years. And so we're just adopting a paradigm that they're already familiar with, but we're applying it to dashboards. And so I think that there's a lot of advantages in doing this. And so, yeah, so that's how, like I said, why most of the dashboards actually that I showed you look the same, right? The CEO dashboard, the operations dashboard, the entity dashboard, because they're all kind of like pages on a website, essentially. And I understand that it would take a while to do these kinds of dashboards for every role, for every area, for every entity. But this is kind of the deal that I propose in my practical dashboards course, which is like, well, if you want a different result, you have to do things differently. And so it might take even like a year or something to get to the point where you have a good sort of network of different dashboards. So yeah, unfortunately, because our time is kind of limited during the call, I don't have time to talk about the rest, but there are many other reasons why dashboards die. And a lot of these actually are quite different depending on what kind of dashboard we're talking about. And so in my course, I actually identify 8 different kinds of dashboards, because the best practices for designing each are actually quite different. And so at the highest level, my kind of taxonomy or categorization system of dashboards, it has 2 sort of high-level families. There's what I call live data dashboards. You can probably guess what these are, right? They're dashboards that are based on live data that might be updating every 10 seconds or every month, but it's still live data. And static data dashboards, which are dashboards that are based on a static snapshot of data that may never be updated in the future. And so within live data dashboards, we have those 3 types that I just mentioned, right? Entity, area, and role dashboards. And those are all in a group that I call tactical monitoring dashboards, because they are all intended to basically answer a single question, which is everything okay? And does anything require my attention? I guess that's 2 questions, but you get the idea. And very, very difficult, by the way, to answer those questions, but extremely important, because in my experience, something like 75% of the time, that's why people are asking for a dashboard in the first place, right? Is because something bad happened in the organization and nobody noticed. And so they want dashboards that will actually tell them, is everything okay? And does anything require my attention? So they actually notice problems. But there are other types as well. There are what I call overview dashboards. And so these are dashboards that provide kind of a high-level sampling of metrics from a given area or role or entity, typically for higher-level stakeholders, maybe board members, things like that, who don't need the full tactical monitoring dashboards. And then there are strategic dashboards, which are dashboards about the entire organization, right? About the entire company, about the entire department. And these are dashboards that are designed to be used in the monthly or quarterly strategic planning session, typically by the management team, where we talk about 5 to 15 KPIs. Very, very different use case. And so you need a different kind of dashboard for that. And then we have what I call canned analysis dashboards. And so these are dashboards that basically automate the answer to a potentially complex data question, but we package it up in a tool so that we can give it to our users so that they can answer that question anytime they want without bugging us on the data team. And then within static data dashboards, we have 3 types. There are persuasion dashboards. You can probably guess what these are for. I would call a lot of these actually infographics or interactives, because it's just a static snapshot of data that never changes. And then we have explanation dashboards, where we're not trying to persuade anybody of anything. We're just trying to explain something or make people aware of something. And engagement dashboards. And so here we're just basically trying to get attention. We're trying to go for clicks and likes and views and all of those wonderful and horrible things. And so really, this is just my way of saying that the best practices for designing dashboards depend on what kind of dashboard you're designing. And I think that's been kind of missing from the discussion for a long time. People just talk about dashboard design best practices without first identifying what kind of dashboard are we talking about, which is kind of a futile discussion, because these are very, very different kinds of information products. And so I'm going to leave it at that for now, but do reach out or follow me on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, if you're not already, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Nick. We do have plenty of time for questions. So it's probably worth addressing a few of those now. Kelsey, if you wanted to take us through them and give us at least 15 minutes at the end to wrap up, and then we'll see if we've got more time for more questions after that. So thank you, Nick. Totally agree with the different types of dashboards that you covered at the end there. By the way, it's that's something that's spoke to me from your training. And I realized after understanding that I'd been designing just for one type of dashboard for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and most organizations actually need many, if not all, of these types in different use cases and different circumstances and different situations. But really, the main reason why I kind of talk about this is to help people put the information that they're hearing about dashboard design best practices into context. Because very often somebody will be talking about dashboard design best practices, but they're really actually designing something that I would call an infographic. And so it's just very different. Like most of the things that they are saying, you can safely ignore if you are working on tactical monitoring dashboards, right? They're just a completely different animal in terms of, should it be more kind of a conservative visual design or more kind of graphic designy? Like all of these questions depend on the kind of dashboard that you're talking about. And so most of these, I see a lot of debates, of course, online. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. And I'm always kind of frustrated because like people are going back and forth on these questions, like, does everything need to fit on one screen or something like that? I'm like, you're not going to get to a yes or no kind of consensus here because it's not a yes or no question, right? For some kinds of dashboards, yes, you should try and get everything on one screen. But for other kinds of dashboards, no, like they can scroll or you can have tabs, splitting the information around. It just depends on the kind of dashboard that you're talking about.
Good. Elsie, what's that first question?
Okay, first question. Thank you to Darius. You sent your question in before the webinar, so I will ask your question first. Nick, if you had to pick, what would be a single thing separating a successful dashboard from a failing one? That's quite a big question.
Yeah. And I think that if I were to answer it as asked, it would be a bad answer, right? And so as I hope I sort of suggested towards the end there that unfortunately, if you think of this as kind of a magic bullet problem where we just with a single thing we can solve it. If we solve this problem, then everybody will start using our dashboards. I used to think that too, but then just after working with over 50 organizations, designing their dashboards, I realized like, no, this is a very kind of multifactorial, multi-causal problem. And so just by focusing on a single improvement, you're not going to get very far. Now, having said that, I do think that probably a lack of action indicators of any type or sentiment indicators of some type is probably the number one reason why dashboards die. But it's, if you solve that, right, there's still going to be many other problems that will prevent your dashboard from being used, 6 or 12 months down the line. But a close second would be, as I showed, right, dashboards that have some kind of action or sentiment indicator, but they're just useless, right? They're not telling the user where to look or how things are going. And so, in a way, those are probably the places where I would start if I were looking to improve the reception of my dashboards, improve user satisfaction, is start looking at those action dots, the 4 thresholds, so that we're at least not flagging everything or flagging nothing on the dashboard and adding some intelligence to the dashboard there. There's work involved, but it's, I think it's pretty doable for many teams. But then that's going to help, but it's still not going to probably be enough. And then you're going to have to do 10 other things in terms of doing things like splitting the dashboard apart into different dashboards for different roles and areas and entities. Because if you only do action dots, but you're still trying to basically have a single dashboard that's supposed to do everything for everyone, which is unfortunately also a very common problem, then the action dots aren't going to save you, right? You're still going to have other problems.
Thanks, Nick. On a related question from Josephine, how do you define these action dot indicators? And I guess that goes into the work that needs to happen before you even start creating a dashboard and putting those action dots in.
Yeah, so I mean, if I interpret the question as like, how do we know where to set the thresholds? So hopefully that's where this question came from, but maybe should let us know if not. But yeah, I mean that's a great question because out there in the real world, if we explain the four thresholds to our audience, this is what crisis means and actually bad and actually good and best case. A lot of times they're going to be like, yeah, okay, I understand that, but I just don't know. What should I consider to be a crisis for this metric? I don't have a lot of experience with it. I'm not very familiar with it. And so there are a couple of tricks that you can use. The first is, of course, show them a history of that metric. Show them a line chart with as much data as you have so they can start to get a sense of what is typical for that metric. But that might not work. They might look at the line chart and say, well, okay, so fine, the metric did this, but or it's been in this range for the last 12 months, but that could still be bad, right? It might have been, sucking for the last 12 months. I don't know. And so what you can then do is say, is basically give them numbers to react to, right? So, okay, so what if this metric hit 100? And they'd be like, I don't know, that could be bad, that could be good. What if it hit 500? What if it hit 1,000? And well, 1,000 would be terrible. It's like, aha, okay, so you do have some intuitions, you do have some feelings about this number. And so, okay, so you know that 1,000 would be terrible. How about 750, right? And so it's kind of like an auction. And so you can at least establish a range with them by giving them numbers to react to as opposed to making it open-ended. You can also consider comparables, right? And so if you have data about, how are the other departments in the organization doing? Are we doing better or worse than them? Do we have any information about our competitors? How are they doing? Are we doing better or worse than them? Obviously, anything like service level agreements or any kind of commitments you have around maintaining certain numbers, obviously those should be considered when you're setting the four thresholds. But even after doing all of this, sometimes you still end up with shrugs, right? They're like, I just don't know, right? 1,000, 10,000, that could be good, it could be bad. I really don't know. And so in that case, you can fall back on the statistics, which is not perfect, right? Because all the statistics do is tell you if a number is sort of goes like unusually higher or lower than it was in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a big problem. It just shows you that it's atypical, but it's better than nothing, right? If that's all you have, then use that.
And a comment from Edwin on action dots. I guess control limits could help getting meaningful action dots. Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yes. Yeah, well, so I did mention those simple statistics that you can use. You can plug in even as few as like 6 or 7 historical values for a given metric, and then using, I assume he's probably talking about, methods from SPC, statistical process control, which is what I recommend in my workshops. Which are some like grade school level calculations. They're very simple arithmetic, basically. You can then plug those historical numbers into a calculation, and it will then spit out, well, if you use the traditional calculation, it will spit out 2 values, right? An upper natural process limit and a lower natural process limit. And so you can use those as actually good and actually bad in the absence of anything else, right? Like it's sort of a default, it's a fallback. I have, in an act of utter blasphemy, modified this 100-year-old calculation and changed some of the constants so that it actually spits out 4 limits, because for action dots, you need 4 thresholds, right? And so I have a calculation that I provide in my workshop again, where it will also generate a crisis as well as an actually bad, actually good, and it will then also generate a best case. But yeah, it is based on statistical process control, which has been around since the 1920s. It's very validated, but I'm just using it in a way that it wasn't really designed to be used. I'm using it for monitoring, which is a little bit different, but it works great.
Thanks, Nick. Question from Diana. Can you apply this to financial results, like tracking the budget, expenses, commitments?
Yeah, you can apply this to anything. I mean, maybe I don't, it's a broad statement, but I can't think of any kinds of metrics off the top of my head that would not be, sort of well suited to this. I mean, I'm always wary whenever I hear the words never or always coming out of my mouth, but there are certain types of metrics which are very kind of chaotic. Like for example, trade show expenses, right? And so it'll be 0 for like 5 months, and then like 500,000 for like 3 days, and then drop, back down to 0 for 2 months. And so there's really no kind of patterns there. And so you can't use statistical process control to monitor metrics like that. But most metrics are not like that. Some metrics, for example, are metrics that increase continuously. Like let's say we're a small company, but we're growing very quickly, like rupe, of course. And our headcount is keeps on going up and up and up and up. And so if you use kind of the standard math, it's always going to flag it as saying, this is unusually high this month. This is unusually high this month, which isn't very helpful. But then again, there are simple calculations that you can use to essentially sort of filter out continuous increases or continuous decreases and still look for kind of anomalies, essentially. Similarly with cyclical data. Like maybe you have data that's, where the values are higher in the summer and they're lower in the winter, for example, but it's always the case. And so again, if you just use the standard off-the-shelf calculation, then it'll always say, oh, it's unusually high in the summer. It's unusually low in the winter, but it doesn't really help you because you are expecting it. And so it doesn't really need to be flagged. But again, there are some simple calculations that I provide in the Practical Dashboards course where you can sort of filter out seasonality or any kind of cycles, right? Daily cycles, weekly cycles, whatever. And so you can still tell if a metric is behaving abnormally, even if it's subject to periodic cycles.
Seasonal change for me, there's always the example of ice cream sales.
Yeah.
They go up in the summer, they go down generally in the winter. Yeah.
Yeah. Inversely correlated with shovel sales and well, at least in my part of the world.
Thanks, Nick. Next question is from Doval. Many dashboards in our organization are heavily open text based, e.g. document lists, lists of customer feedback. I guess this would be an overview dashboard type. Many times such dashboards look really cluttered, and I also observe people stop using it, even though the desire to have this came from their side. Any suggestions on how one can make such dashboards more user-friendly and less cluttered?
Yeah, I guess ultimately, something like 75% of the time, and I think I mentioned this during my talk, the user just has one question they're trying to answer, which is like, is everything okay? Does anything require my attention? And so my approach with a dashboard like that would be to try and figure out how can we help the user answer that question, even if we're dealing with things like Twitter feeds and purely sort of text-based or non-quantitative data. And so I would try to see, can we sort of actually quantify this in some way? And so maybe we're looking at the number of comments that are being posted. Now, of course, with large language models, you can do sentiment analysis, and then you can basically sort of start essentially coming up with quantitative information about all of this kind of qualitative or text-based data. And so then we can actually start flagging things, saying, oh, like the number of comments was unusually low this month, or our sentiment around what's in these documents has been getting worse, that kind of thing. And so, but this would be the case if you're in a monitoring situation, right, where there's a constant inflow of new text-based content, like blue sky comments or new documents being written or whatever. But I don't know if that's the use case here. Maybe it's more of a sort of a search use case where they're just trying to show people, okay, here are all of the the documents that are available, and that would be a little bit different. And I would actually that's kind of getting out of the realm of what I would call a dashboard, because to me, if you're going to call something a dashboard, it has to focus primarily on quantitative information. Otherwise, it's just more like a report or just a general kind of document as well. So yeah, it's kind of hard to answer the question without knowing what the main purpose of having that information display is in the first place. Is just so people can see what is available or search for documents, or is it a monitoring thing where they're trying to see, how is the nature or perhaps quantity of these documents changing over time? And that's then we can start to flag things like, that are potentially of interest or problems.
Yeah, I think for me it sort of sounds as if there needs to be that high level dashboard view where we can see at a glance, oh, we've got this many responses, that's higher than usual. But then if you really needed the text in the background, you could have a report that linked to it. So if you worked in Power BI, maybe you'd have your dashboard and that could link to a report which has all the tables with the actual text that people may or may not need or use.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so thanks for pointing that out. Like, I'm not suggesting that you hide all this text-based information, but you would layer on quantitative information. But as you mentioned, it's still, of course, probably important for people to actually see those documents or those, LinkedIn posts or whatever it is that you're monitoring. Yeah, that's a good point.
Dorville's got back in the comments. The goals are different for every dashboard, but I am particularly interested in the monitoring part. Example, feedback, defects, complications on different types of products. So yeah, it does sound as if some form of text analysis, or if your feedback is maybe hard-coded, like, oh, we have a defect, that's why I'm complaining. Could you count that? Could you then highlight that in the dashboard to say we've had high number of complaints due to defected products, something like that? Yeah,
exactly. So it does sound like it's a monitoring context, and so we need to try and find, as you said, quantitative metrics that we can then use to then track, just as we would any other metric, in terms of, is it going into a kind of an actionable range, or is it unusual based on its history? Yep, totally agree.
Yep. Okay. Next question from Susan. When designing dashboards for senior leaders who are not fully versed in the data and what it can tell them, how do you identify the charts, graph information to include in your dashboard for them? How do you identify the needs of the user to avoid providing the wrong information? And I'll open that up to yourself, Nick, and Ian as well, in case he has any thoughts too.
Sure. Well, Ian, do you want to start? I want to hear what your answer is, and then I can cheat and integrate that into mine. Oh, muted.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I think your action dots will be quite universally understood. You don't need much explanation. People don't need to understand the metrics to look at a dashboard and see some bright red dots to know that it needs action. So yeah, I don't think you need to educate people on all of the data necessarily, and all of the problems and the technicalities of it if you use that technique. So
yeah, and that's really actually kind of also where I'm just showing on my screen here, these overview dashboards. This is actually a relatively recent addition to the taxonomy. I only added these just kind of a few months ago. Actually, because of this kind of comment where people are saying things like, well, I have some high-level leader, whether it's an executive or a board member or something like that. And if I show them one of these tactical monitoring dashboards, they're going to be like, oh, even though, as Ian, as you pointed out, right, those action dots help a great deal, because it doesn't just look like a wall of numbers anymore, because it's giving me pointers in terms of where to actually look. But I mean, if it's a board member, somebody who's really not immersed in the day-to-day activities of the organization, even that might be too much. And so these overview dashboards, these look more like your typical kind of dashboards. They're going to have maybe 4, 5, or 6 metrics, a wider variety of chart types. You might have a map on there or a pie chart or something like that. And it's really just to provide an overview, right? That's, again, why I kind of chose that name. They're not for monitoring, right? They're not going to answer that question of, is everything okay? Because in order to do that, we have to show you way more information. But if it's just kind of like, give me an idea of what's going on in operations or what's going on with this team or whatever, then this would be enough. But I mean, and in terms of, okay, we're only going to put like 5 charts on this dashboard. How do we decide which metrics are going to be in those charts? How do we decide what chart types those are going to be? You're really in the realm of guessing at this point, because and the more you know about the target audience, the better your guesses are going to be, of course, right? If you know nothing about them, then it's it's probably not going to go very well. But because we're only showing them this tiny, tiny slice of information, we can't show them everything, of course. And so, yeah, there's no sort of real science to this. You just think, okay, so we know this is what we know about this board member or whatever. They tend to be interested in this, these metrics or this kind of data. And so that's what we're going to put on the dashboard, the overview dashboard, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope that that's going to be what they actually needed. But then, of course, if they have follow-up questions, right, say, well, what about this other metric that wasn't there? Or I want more detail about this metric that is there. Well, then you can go into tactical monitoring dashboards. Say, okay, you wanted sort of a deeper dive. You want to know more metrics about operations or whatever. Okay, I've got something for that too, right? It's just not necessarily the first thing that I'm going to show if I'm worried that I'm going to kind of overwhelm them. But yeah, for these overview dashboards, really the only kind of advice I can give is try to find out as much as you can about the target audience. Like, what is that board member? What do they tend to be interested in? In terms of what chart types to use, that's a whole other topic that I cover in my practical charts course. Surprisingly difficult to make those kinds of decisions in terms of what chart types should I use, what kinds of color palettes should I use, should I include 0 in the scale of this chart or not, when should I use a map or a bar chart instead of a map. And so yeah, like I said, that's in my practical charts course. The shortest I could make it was 2 full days in person or 4 half days online. I do have, by the way, if you go to my website, which is this, practicalreporting.com, I do have an on-demand version of that course. And actually, I think there's a rupe discount code for people who want to take that. And so if that's something you're struggling with, how do I design individual charts, not dashboards, but individual charts for an overview dashboard or for even like a PowerPoint presentation or a PDF or something like that, then if you go to my website, it's called Practical Charts on Demand. And it's about like 6.5 hours of video and 45 lessons, and it covers all of that. Surprisingly large number of things to know about individual charts.
Thanks, Nick. The books are also good as well, as a little side there.
They are, yeah. I'd just add to that. So that particular dashboard you were referring to, Nick, sometimes people may have heard the term balanced scorecard. It's a very high level view of the organization. And for those of you that are using Power BI, which will be quite a lot of you, the built-in KPI can work quite well. You can have a actionably good threshold that's going to be green with a tick, and an actionably bad threshold which will be red with an exclamation mark, and a neutral which is just going to be grey. So, and those anybody is going to understand those numbers. That's good because it's green and it's got a tick, or it's blue and it's got a tick if you use our color scheme.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to add my little comment on Susan's question, how do you identify the needs of the user to avoid providing the wrong information? I attended a session last night, and it was all about how do you work with your users to get that information, and host a workshop and ask them questions. And you really only need 7 questions, 7 W's: the who, the what, the why, the when, the how much, the how many. I've missed one.
Where?
I always miss one. Where, and the where. I'll put that in the chat, but I think those can be the sort of starting points to actually starting to gather the information before you actually think about designing your dashboard. Get to know your user, finding out why they need to know, what they need to know, etc., etc. And then once you have that, you can start to think about your chart design, dashboard design. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good advice for sure. When it comes to dashboards, though, in my experience, 75% of the time, the question that they're trying to ask, and it can be kind of hard to decipher, is the same, which is everything okay? It's not all the time, right? There are other types of questions, other situations, other reasons why they might want to look stuff up, for example. But 75% of the time, that is the question. And this is, I think, something that sort of tripped up people a lot in the past when it comes to dashboards, because they spend all this time doing all this user research and trying to figure out what business question is the user trying to answer. And that's great for about 25% of dashboards. But like I said, 75% of the time, the question is the same, which is, I just need to know if everything's okay. The challenge, of course, is that actually answering that question is incredibly difficult. And that's why there's the 3 types of dashboards, like the entity area role dashboards. You need lots of different, instances of these, because there's many different roles and areas. But when you know that and you're listening, as you should have, like, if you can get their time to have a workshop, a meeting, to get this information out of them. Once you know that, you'll hear that sort of coded a lot in the things that they're saying, right? They won't say, my business question is, is everything okay? But a lot of the questions that they'll actually put out there boil down to that, right? Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, next question is from Vivian. When developing a dashboard for the whole organization, different departments, roles, audiences have different KPIs, threshold of action dots. How do you present the visuals data in one dashboard?
Yeah, so that's kind of my radical thesis here, is don't try to put it all on one dashboard. We've been trying that for decades, and it has not been working. In fact, it's so common, this notion that we're going to try and create sort of the one dashboard to rule them all, that I have a name for them. I call them Swiss Army knife dashboards, right? We're trying to pack all of these tools and capabilities into a single tool. But you end up having to make so many compromises, right? You end up with a saw that's like this long and a really, kind of shitty pair of pliers because it's only like this big, because we had to sort of hobble everything in order to cram it all into a single tool. It's kind of like trying to put all the information on an entire website onto one page. It's like, it's just not going to work. And it has not worked in the past. And so really the solution is, don't try to do that. Don't try and put everything on a single dashboard where, like, all the user roles can get all the information that they need. It sounds great in theory, like when you're in the requirements meeting and you're with your users and somebody's up on the whiteboard and they're drawing the dashboard and like, oh, it's going to be awesome, right? We're going to have the ERP information coming in, the HR information, the sales information. And so anytime anybody ever needs anything, it's going to be in the dashboard, which sounds great in theory. But the reality is that, even all the information that a single user might need while they're doing their job, if you were to put all that on a single dashboard, the dashboard would be literally the size of a football pitch. Like, it'd be enormous by the time you start segmenting the metrics by product and by region and all that. And so that's why I kind of realized a number of years ago that really it's probably, going to work much better if we start treating dashboards like websites, right? And so you have pages, of course, like on a news website. And so for a particular role, you might have a role dashboard for them, but it's just targeted at that role. And so if it's a dashboard for the VP of marketing, then you only have to worry about what the VP of marketing needs. And you don't have to worry about what the VP of operations needs or the CEO or whatever, right? You can be sort of much more focused. It's more work, of course, right? Now you're going to have lots of different dashboards rather than having this kind of, Swiss Army knife dashboard. But that work, even though it doesn't benefit you directly as the dashboard developers and designers, it dramatically benefits your users, right? This becomes much more useful to them. So yeah, hopefully that's useful.
Thanks, Nick. We do have 3 more questions and we do have time, but aware that some of you may be needing to head off in a little bit. So I think, Ian, would you like to just give a quick next steps and then we can try and answer those 3 remaining questions before we close?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, just this last slide, and then I'll put the slide up again with the details for Nick's Amsterdam training. So some recommended next steps from us. The books are a great place to start. Practical charts and more practical charts, and practical dashboards coming out next year. Really looking forward to that.
Working on it.
No pressure, Nick. So Nick's training is mentioned, online on demand, online live. So Nick, if you hadn't gathered, is from Canada, and he does those in the afternoon in the morning in Canada. So it's in the afternoon here in Europe, which is good. And in-person training. So if you can get to Amsterdam next month and in November for practical charts, then practical dashboards, highly recommended. Our training, so we have our data storytelling best practice and principles, which is, Nick sometimes describes what he does as the grammar of data visualization, spelling and grammar. Ours is like pidgin English. It's an introduction to data storytelling best practice and principles. So 2 half days. But also, how do you do this stuff in Power BI? Power BI is a good tool, but it has some serious limitations. And we show you practically how you can develop good dashboards and reports in Power BI. So we've got 3 courses: Data Storytelling Best Practice and Principles and Power BI Data Storytelling Parts 1 and 2, which will give you lots of tips and tricks and ways of doing things in Power BI. A lot of that will be based upon having a good Power BI theme and template, which we have. We have a theme that we've spent many years developing and a template which we customize and deliver for clients, which will fast track you towards consistent best practice visualizations, reports and dashboards, and it will also drastically cut down on the amount of time it takes you to develop new dashboards and reports as well. Within coaching and consulting, we can carry out a usability audit of your current reports, give you an idea of why they may not be used, see which ones are being used, which ones aren't. We can help you redesign those dashboards and reports and rebuild them with you or for you as well. We also have a bunch of design templates around how wireframing your dashboards and reports, but also thinking about how you design your data model, which is a very important topic as well. All of this information is available on our website, which I'll just show you very quickly. Here, when you go to our website, you will find at the top there, Nick's Education, Nick Desbarats Education, and down here are the links to buy tickets for training and Nick's books as well. And you'll notice you have various discount codes. Please use those. Go to our website to book Nick's training. You will get exclusive discounts that you only get through us. Also, our training and services you will find on our services page here. So this is all about training and when it's coming up. So if you're looking at that particular course, for example, you can register for it there. So I'll leave those QR codes up just for a second in case you want to get a picture of those. I think Kelsey's put the links in the chat as well.
Yep.
And I'll also leave you with the Amsterdam training link there as well. But if you use that link, remember to use the rupe01 discount code, rupe-01. I didn't even take 10 minutes, Kelsey. How many gold stars do I get? So
I'll give you 2. I'll give you 2.
Harsh grade.
So James, just very quickly on the sort of online workshops, are there new dates planned for the online workshops? Currently says June 2025. I think this is on your website, maybe.
Okay. If you can tell me what page says that, because I thought I removed all those references after that workshop had passed. I'd appreciate that, James. Maybe there's a page that I missed on my site that still says June. But I am actually planning probably to do one in January or February, an online public open registration workshop. But I haven't chosen the dates yet, and it's not confirmed that there will actually be one in Q1 of 26. But there could be one.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I see that link. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that just it should say yeah. So it says on that page, this workshop has already taken place. Phew. Okay.
You're okay. Okay, quick answering of these last 3 questions, and then we'll release you all back for the rest of the day. Question from Karen. That's a fantastic presentation. However, I feel like it's blown my mind in terms of its complexity. Can you design these independently in modules, I suppose, because it seems very complex for a first cut dashboard? So I guess it's the different elements that could be within a dashboard. Could you design them independently?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. That is kind of my my proposal to dashboard developers and designers is essentially as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, it just hasn't been going well. Traditional dashboards do not have good track records, and so if we want a different result, we have to do things differently. And so one of my favorite kind of analogies is is this, right? My iPhone here. Like when you think about the number of features that this thing has and the fact that it ships without a user manual, that is incredible, right? Like and of course the world rewarded Apple for that. They basically took a lot of the complexity that was in devices like other kind of smartphones at the time where it was basically they push a lot of that complexity onto the user saying, here, you figure out how to get applications on your phone and all that. I said, no, okay, we will take on that complexity. So we simplify your life as a user. And so that's my proposal to dashboard designers and developers is essentially we need to take on that complexity. We need to build much more intelligence into our dashboards, which is going to be more work, right? It is going to make our lives more complicated. But the reason we're doing that is to make our users' lives simpler. Like from the user's perspective, when I show them a dashboard, like, say the operations or a CEO dashboard that I was showing during my talk, to them, it's very simple, right? It's like, okay, yeah, here's all the numbers that I need to worry about, but I need to worry about this one first and this one second and this one third. There's nothing that's hidden. I can get to anything very quickly, very easily. And so for them, it's very simple. It just works like a website, right? Like the kinds of websites that they've been using for years. But from our perspective as dashboard designers and developers, this is a big project. Like we are, taking on the complexity basically so that our users don't have to. But when you think about it, if we don't do that, right? If we don't, for example, have dashboards that tell users like where to focus, or that even do basic kind of quality checking on the numbers. I didn't have time to talk about that. But like if the user sees a number of the dashboard, like, oh, current client satisfaction, average client satisfaction is like 12.7 on 10 or something because we had a data quality issue, and they see that and they're like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to look at, wrong values. And so if we can basically kind of, like I said, build enough intelligence into our dashboards so that the user doesn't have to do things like, sorry, let me reframe it. If the dashboard doesn't do these things, the user has to, right? They're not optional. The user has to then figure out, okay, what kind of day are we having? Which numbers on here require my attention? Are there any data quality issues? Right? Do I need to make sure that these numbers are actually right? And so, like I said, if the dashboard isn't doing that, then we're pushing all that work onto users. And that's basically the status quo. That's what most dashboards do. They push a lot of work onto users. And then users are like, well, I don't want to do all that work. I don't have time. And then they don't use the dashboard. And so if we can have the dashboard do a lot of that work, which is more complicated, then we're probably going to get much better user traction and satisfaction. It looks like, Ian, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just realised we've just got a few minutes to go. I put up the slide for the webinar survey, which we can put the link in the chat for as well. But there was one question or comment earlier that I thought was something that you definitely want to comment on before we finished, that came from Karen as well. And Karen said, I'm working on a page in an existing report which I suspect isn't well used. So I want to try to make it really interesting. And I wondered if you had any quick comment on that, Nick.
Hard to comment without seeing it, of course, right? But the most common issues that I see are the ones that I mentioned before, right? A lack of action or sentiment indicators, or using one of those kind of conventional methods, like showing change versus previous period or deviation from target. And so when I'm doing consulting and people show me dashboards and reports that people are not using or not happy with, that's usually the first thing that I'll do is say, okay, we need to add action dots essentially to this because action dots are interesting, right? They grab attention. If when I'm looking at a dashboard, there's a lot of information on it, but there's like 2 dark red dots and 3 medium ones and 1 light one. I guarantee it. I've seen this hundreds of times. People are like, what is that? Like, why is that flagged, right? And so it immediately generates interest. Whereas if you show them a dashboard that has no indicators or where everything is flagged, they're just not very interested in that. Legit, understandably. Like, why would they be, right? It's just essentially almost like showing them random numbers, really.
Yeah, I do remember your comment as well from the last time we did this webinar, because sometimes people will look at a dashboard and say, well, oh, it's a bit grey, it's a bit boring. And I remember your very technical term of boring with highlights. So you want to make things jump out at people.
Yeah, and that's one method that unfortunately I see people attempt, when they realize their dashboard is not being used, is they'll try to make the dashboard essentially flashier. They'll start to add a lot of different colors and just randomizing chart types and things like that. And hopefully it's clear after my talk that that's not going to work, right? If anything, you're making things worse, because now if I have this very kind of super colorful base layer, I can't flag anything, right? There's nothing that pops out. So yeah, that's why, as you said, I call my design philosophy, at least for tactical monitoring dashboards specifically, boring with highlights. You need that boring base layer so that you can then highlight things and those highlights pop out immediately. Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. So we are about out of time, everybody. Kelsey, I don't know if you've got anything that we need to wrap up with, but thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Yeah, there are 3 more questions, but what we'll do is we will take the questions that are in the Q&A and also in the chat. We'll split them between us and sort of do our own little answering session and put them on our website so that you can see the answers to them. That'll take a bit of time to get on the website, so I will let you know when that is complete and you can have that link available to you. Yeah.
We made this one half an hour longer than the last one because we needed more time for questions. We still need more time. So next one, Nick, will be 3 hours long, I think.
Sure, I'm up for it. Probably no one else is up for it though. So
No.
Okay. I'm now off to get my lunch and get some fresh air. Hopefully you've all had a really good session. You've learnt something, maybe try and think about your own dashboards and reports, and we will hopefully see you very soon. Thanks, everyone.
yeah, perhaps in person in Amsterdam.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Okay, I'm going to end the event now.